this second blog post, we're going to look at some of the other findings from the ATEAM trial and also how the data was reported and taken up. So just remind us, Julia, some of the top line findings to start us off from this time.
Yeah, so people who were allocated to the Alexander groups in the trial experienced sustained, so long-term, over a year, sustained reductions in their back pain and the disability that was associated with their back pain. And in particular, the group who were offered the 24 Alexander lessons had really striking reductions. So for example, 3 days of pain per month compared with 21 days for the control group, and clinically meaningful reductions in the disability associated with back pain. And I remember at the time when the trial results came out, I looked around, I was trying to find another intervention that showed such striking long-term reductions. And I certainly couldn't find anything else. So they're really quite, exceptional results.
And last time we mentioned that there was a little bit of confusion over the results for the group who were offered only 6 Alexander lessons. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so with the main findings, so the group who were offered the 6 lessons, they did experience significant benefit, but overall, this is only about half of what the 24 lesson group experienced. Mm. But what was interesting is that because of the way the trial was designed, there was effectively a subgroup of people who were offered 6 lessons followed by an exercise prescription. And in that group, there were some much more significant benefits.
Okay, so what's an exercise prescription and when was it used?
Well, it was basically the participants sitting down with their GP and agreeing a form of exercise that was agreeable to them. So that could be, it's usually aerobic, so it could be, for example, walking for half an hour a time, 3 days a week, for example. And they were supported in that with visits to a nurse. And and this was because it was thought that there was quite likely to be some benefit from exercise in itself on back pain. And that was, I suppose, the other thing just to mention is that that the exercise prescription began after the Alexander lessons or massage had already begun, so kind of followed on. I'm just thinking now it might be good to look at the study design again. You might remember this slide from last, a simpler version of this slide from last time, because this will help us to see how the exercise actually fitted in. So really the design was quite clever because what it meant is that it was possible to explore the effect of exercise both independently, but also then the effect of exercise in addition to one of the interventions. So what we can see here, again, we've got the participants being randomized to one of the interventions, but in total there were actually 8 groups. And so they either had massage or Alexander lessons or usual care alone, but in each case, either with or without exercise prescription. And again, just a little reminder, everyone continued to receive their usual care from their GP throughout.
Okay, so what effect did the exercise have?
Well, on its own, a really modest benefit, but when it was combined with the 6 lessons, then it was a bit more interesting. So maybe let's go back just to the main findings for a moment, just to kind of refresh our memories. So this is what we were looking at last time. So at 1 year, there were statistically significant and clinically meaningful improvements in the disability associated with back pain for those participants offered the 24 Alexander lessons. So this is a Roland-Morris score at 1 year. And you can see with that threshold of the 2.5 for the Roland-Morris score, you can see that that's what made it clinically meaningful for the 24 lesson group. And here you can see that the 6 Alexander lesson group, which is in yellow, yes, they did enjoy significant benefit, but not enough to be considered clinically meaningful. So this amount of benefit was actually only 41% of that enjoyed by the 24 lesson group. Okay, so that's the kind of the main findings. Now, if we now turn to look at the results for the individual groups, those individual 8 groups, so that we can see what the separate impact is of being given an exercise prescription. So what we're seeing here with the grey bar, we can see that there was a really marginal benefit of adding exercise prescription to usual GP care. But actually following up massage with exercise made quite a big impact, which we can see here in the blue. And then there was an even greater effect when exercise followed 6 Alexander lessons. And here participants were able to do on average almost 3 more daily tasks without being limited by their back pain. And indeed, 6 Alexander lessons followed by exercise were 72% as effective as 24 Alexander lessons alone. And again, what you can see here is that the greatest benefit was seen with the 24 Alexander lesson group. And interestingly, this was seen regardless of whether or not exercise was included. Possibly this was just because people were feeling a lot better in any case, and so were tending to do more exercise. So what interests me here really is the way that the results were reported. And it was interesting that in the main paper, the 6 lesson group results were really highlighted. And the conclusion was that 6 lessons followed by exercise were almost as effective, or nearly as effective, I think were the words, as 24 lessons. Now, it's a matter of opinion as to whether something that's a bit less than 3/4 of something else represents nearly as effective or not. But putting that on one side for a moment, the thing that's I think really unfortunate is that the way the trial was actually taken up is the fact that these results, is 72% applied to a group who followed up the lessons with exercise. That's kind of lost. The exercise component is lost. So what you hear reported is, 6 lessons are nearly as effective as 24. And that simply is not true.
Frustrating. And did you see the same thing for the pain outcome measure as well?
Yes. So again, just sort of as a reminder with the main results, so you can see the big drop in pain, particularly with the 24 lesson group. And if you compare the 2 groups, the 24 and 6 lessons, you can see that 6 lessons are really just over half as effective as 24. Mm-hmm. But if we move on now to the results for the individual groups, so this is the intervention either followed or not by exercise. So this is a little bit of a different picture to the Rowland-Morris score results. So we can see that an exercise prescription didn't actually have much of an impact on the effect of either 6 or 24 lessons in terms of the pain being experienced. And we can also see that 6 lessons followed by exercise were 65% as effective as 24 lessons in terms of the days in pain.
What do you conclude from these findings?
Well, I guess I would say that, I wouldn't want to routinely recommend 6 lessons on their own for people with back pain, which is not to say that individuals might not benefit from 6 lessons. Yes, they might, but this is really giving us a big picture of on average what you might expect. And so it seems clear to me that 6 lessons is not the optimum. However, if that's all somebody can afford, then I think this is telling us that actually we'll encourage them to undertake sort of simple exercise like walking, swimming, and that's likely to be, to give a reasonable benefit.
Yeah, okay. And were there any other consequences of the way these results have been sort of reported and misunderstood?
Yeah, so the way that research works is, obviously researchers build on what's gone before.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, some researchers have taken away the message that 6 lessons are as effective as 24.
Mm.
And I think the danger of that is really doing a huge disservice to the Alexander technique if people are using this number of lessons as being kind of like the standard in the trials, which is what's been happening. It's a little bit like if people were given an antibiotic and they unwittingly only took half the dose, what would you think? You'd think, oh, well, the antibiotic doesn't work.
And can you give any examples of where this has happened in research on the Alexander technique?
Yeah, so in particular, I'm thinking of, there was a trial that was published, I think, in 2015, and it was comparing Alexander lessons or heat pads for people with chronic neck pain. Now, based on the ATEAM results, they chose to use not even 6 lessons, 5 lessons. And even, just as bad, the follow-up point was at 5 weeks, which really is not long enough, in our opinion, for any changes really to be integrated and for people to be starting to apply this in their daily life. Now, the conclusion of that study was that Alexander lessons are no more effective than heat pads for people with chronic neck pain. So you can see the problem. Yeah. That's the way things are then, it's taken up and then reported. And, Joe Public kind of think, oh yeah, Alexander lessons, they don't work for neck pain. So in this particular instance, we were quite lucky because meanwhile, the big Atlas neck pain trial had been going on. And because it's a much bigger, more robust trial, it provides much stronger evidence. So we were actually able to show that no, Alexander lessons are effective for chronic neck pain. So you can see the problem.
Yeah. Phew, very good job that the Atlas trial was going on. Yeah. So that's a good point maybe to stop there. Bring the things to a close, but maybe we can come back to the Atlas trial in a future blog post. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And and then maybe just to say, I guess one of the other things that I'm quite keen on is the fact that when we're presenting our, if you like, the research evidence base, we really want to bring together the ATEAM and the Atlas trial. Now, part of the reason for that, if we think about ATEAM, it's this fantastic trial, fantastic results. But if you look at the National Institute for Care and Health Excellence, NICE, when they did their back pain review and they looked at the ATEAM results, and their conclusion was, yeah, this is really promising. Need further research, really promising. But not enough evidence to change guidelines, so not enough evidence to recommend that Alexander lessons are suitable for people with back pain. And you can understand that it's a basic fundamental tenet of science that that you need to be able to repeat things. So one trial on its own is not going to cut the mustard in general. So, and I just again, I just want to kind of emphasize that, because sometimes you see references to, oh yeah, Alexander technique, it's in the back pain guidelines. Well, no, it's not. It's not, if there's a recommendation for further research, it's not recommended currently. But what we do have is we have a second large randomized controlled trial. Okay, not in back pain, but it's still a chronic pain condition of the spine. So I think it kind of bolsters our case if we can always present those together side by side.
And they're both published in top international medical journals, which also gives them weight and cred, doesn't it?
Absolutely, they're both in top 5 global medical journals. So yeah,
brilliant.
Not to be easily dismissed.
No, indeed, absolutely not. Well, that's been really illuminating for me, Julia, talking to you about those.
Thanks, that's great. Okay.
And it was a real pleasure, and hopefully we can talk again some more about the Atlas trial. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.